Play is whatever sparks joy. I had an amazing conversation today with Maggie Haraburda. She is the founder and clinical director of Unfurling Littles, a private practice based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She is an autistic board certified behavior analyst, and she specializes in child-led applied behavior analysis, integrating acceptance and commitment training to provide neurodiversity affirming care. Today, you are going to learn on the podcast all about how we can provide and create a culture of acceptance while providing applied behavior analysis. Maggie talks all about the approach that she uses in her practice, and she talks about play in such a beautiful and nuanced way. I can't tell you how excited I am about meeting Maggie. And I would love to bring her back to do a talk for us in the ABA Speech Connection membership. The way she talks about play is just so cool. The way that they write goals, she talks about assenting to a play expansion. She just really understands child development. And she has such a wonderful background, and she's dedicated to fostering compassionate, strength-based intervention that honor each child's individuality. You are going to absolutely learn and love this conversation, hopefully just one of many, with Maggie Haraburda. I'm Rose Griffin, a speech therapist, board-certified behavior analyst, and founder of ABA Speech. It wasn't all that long ago that I felt overwhelmed by providing therapy for my autistic students and any students who were not yet speaking. Fast forward through many doubts, tears, research, and courses, and you will see the framework that I use today and share with over 60,000 readers weekly. One that will help you support your students and feel more confident in the process. I created the ABA Speech podcast to give you simple, step-by-step strategies to help you reach all of your students wherever they are on their communication journeys. If you're a speech therapist, BCBA, RBT student, or parent who's looking to help all students develop a way to communicate with the world, you are in the right place, friend. Let's get started. We have a great show for you today. We have with us Maggie Haraburda. Thank you so much, Maggie, for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Rose.
And I came across your Instagram because somebody who I think provides therapy, speech therapy, for your clinic shared something really nice about your clinic and on Instagram. And I thought to myself, well, I need to follow this person today. And then I reached out. We had a great conversation before the podcast, and I'm so excited for other people to learn about your work because it's just so amazing what you're doing. So, and you live in Philadelphia. So, I mean, I love Philadelphia. The food scene there, so jealous. I'm jealous. It is a great city. Okay. So how did you know that you wanted to be a BCBA? What was your path to that?
Definitely not a conventional one. I went to school for early childhood education and started working with an autistic 6-year-old who was non-speaking at the time. And I realized that through play and scripting with him, specifically Thomas and Friends, he began to pick up on these gestalts that we were using in play together. And I recognized that I felt safer with him than I'd ever felt with anyone that I'd worked with before. And so I changed my major to special education, continued to work as a special ed teacher for a little bit in a Reggio Emilia inspired school. Before going into early intervention, so the birth to 3 system in Vermont at the time. Okay. I then moved back to Philly and continued to do early intervention. And up until that point, I really didn't like ABA. I didn't like the field, and I didn't like what I had seen or read or been exposed to. And going to University of Vermont, some of my professors had spoken unkindly about it as well.
Oh, okay.
But I decided to go into the field when I found Project Impact, one of the naturalistic developmental behavior interventions. And I liked the way that it was child-led. Some of it I wanted to leave behind, but around the same time, I also found ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. And so I'm like, well, if the field is going in this direction, that seems and feels like something that I could and would want to be a part of. So then I signed up for a master's program and here I am.
Oh, amazing. And that's interesting you say that. So when I feel like I'm a lot older than you. So I'm 46, but when I was in graduate school, I remember I had a professor who I loved, and I could tell she didn't like ABA, but she didn't really, I could just tell. There was no overt, and I later had her on the podcast, and does awesome things in the field. And she actually worked with Lovas, who was one of the very first people to kind of talk about ABA. And so then I was like, okay, because I was different than kind of what you're providing and things like that. So, well, I'm excited that you're a BCBA because I feel like you are sharing great information. And I feel like, Project Impact, we had them on the podcast, and I'll link that in the show notes. That was probably our first season or second. So I don't even know what episode, but I love NDBIs, and I feel like when you say something's an NDBI, you have to be so specific on what that means. And so I read like the NDBI book that Schreibman et al. Put together. And I have a course in the ABA Speech Connection all about naturalistic interventions, because as a speech therapist in BCBA, I like took in that information, jumbled it all in my brain, and then put out a 5-hour course that hopefully helps people, to provide more naturalistic interventions, because a lot of people don't know what NDBI is. And even though there have been ASHA articles, research articles about NDBI, there's been presentations at ASHA, but most people don't go to ASHA because it's expensive and, far away, and you have to take time off of therapy. And a lot of BCBAs don't know about NDBI. So I think what you're doing is really exciting. Your clinic is really fascinating and different. Can you tell us a little bit about your clinic in Philadelphia?
Yeah, so we started it about a year ago now, and it really came out of a desire to make a space that was more neuro-affirming and assent-based for kids. We were supporting a child in a traditional preschool environment, and it was just really challenging. We felt like the school was pushing us to mold her to fit into their curriculum, which isn't something that we do at Unfurling Littles. And we are working to become a Philadelphia Medicaid provider, which to do so, you have to have like a brick and mortar in Philly. Right. So we had this space that we weren't really using. So we started seeing her in the clinic, and we were blown away by the progress that she made in such a short amount of time. I mean, her language just exploded. She was so much more regulated. And she was really making like very meaningful progress that didn't feel as trivial as what the school that we were in was wanting us to do. And from there, it kind of just blossomed. We had another child join us, then another. And then where we rent over in Philadelphia approached me about renting the bigger office, which is like a 3,800 square foot previously dance studio. I said, okay, why not? Let's do this thing. So we did, and we've really been pulling from a lot of different philosophies and different strategies that are evidence-based from ABA to kind of create this space that is technically an ABA clinic, but we're simulating a preschool. So we have a special educator who runs the day and kind of keeps the tempo of a preschool. But the beautiful thing is that it is assent-based. So if we're running a circle time or a morning meeting and a child isn't ready to go or isn't willing to go, we don't force them. We say, thank you for telling us no. And then we think, okay, well, why did they say no? And what can we do next time to support them to come over to the morning meeting? So it's been really fun, honestly, to see a space where these kids, most importantly to me, feel safe, welcomed, and accepted by the people around them. And they're building such amazing connections with the staff and with one another and making progress in areas that really matter. In my opinion, like access to joy, regulation, increased self-advocacy, these things that when you're in a traditional school setting, you don't always get to target because they're so compliance heavy.
Yeah, I know. I was just writing my broadcast. My son got diagnosed with ADHD this year, and I was like, sometimes it can make school feel like a war zone. And I was like, that really drove it home when he got diagnosed with ADHD. I was like, oh my gosh, every day is really hard. Every single thing about life is really hard. And then, he's doing good now, but it's like it feels really traumatic when things are not going well. So thank you for doing that. I love that. And I like that you talk about that. We did a journal article course in our membership last year about this research article about indices of happiness and unhappiness. And it was really really cool because sometimes we just assume we understand what is somebody's indicator of happiness or joy, like you said, and it's not always the same for everybody. So I love that. And I think when you're doing good things like that, people will just find out about it and you'll just keep having to get the bigger space.
And it's been wild. I mean, we have 37 employees now, and I
Wow.
don't want to grow, but it's tough. Like I never thought we'd be at this place a year ago, but we have over 350 families on our wait list wanting services, and there's just not enough people, at least in my opinion, in the area of Philadelphia practicing this way that is
Right.
event-based and child-led. And, children learn through play when they're little. They don't learn through drills. And so why not create more environments that are play-based?
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you bring up morning meeting because so I live in Ohio, but for 3 years I lived in Austin, Texas, and I was an autism facilitator and support specialist. And I would go, it was a 35 school district, and I would go out and I'd visit the speech therapist every month. I would do a training at their faculty, like their meeting, and then I would go out and I would visit them. And it was a really, really cool position. And always morning meeting. I joke about that a lot because it's a hard time. Morning meeting's tough for autistic students. It's a really hard time. Kids, it's hard for them to sit and it's not always the most engaged, activity. If it's not visuals and active participation, it can be tough. So I love that you shared that because I know that you've probably seen some morning meetings that were a little lackluster and didn't go as planned.
I think it's really about getting creative in how we're defining participation, because there's so many of these schools we go into, they say, well, participation is sitting quietly, looking, listening. And for us, kids could be all the way across the room playing, and they're still actively participating because they're listening. And we know
Right.
this because they're then taking the things they're learning at morning meeting and repeating them. So it doesn't
Yes.
like what we've thought it needs to. It can look like flexible participation that meets that person's individual needs.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That's great. So you brought up play, which is amazing, and it is so very important for our students. I had this professional experience this past year where I was on a call. I got asked to be on a board for a really cool healthcare company called Cicero Therapy. And one of the other board members is Carol Westby, who actually came up with these play scales, which is really just fascinating to talk to somebody that you really look up to. And I'm like, I've been reading your name for 20 plus years in books. And actually her play scales are in the NDBI book that I keep talking about. But play is important. So what are some do's and don'ts for you regarding play, kind of in your philosophy?
So I think it's really about figuring out what is the child's motivation in that moment. So why is it sparking joy for them? Because for me, I believe that play is whatever sparks joy. And so what is this child really trying to get out of this moment? Are they enjoying it because they like to watch the way it spins? Or are they trying to see, what happens? Are they enjoying destructive play, throwing things? Do they like imaginary play or pretend play? What is really the root of what brings them joy? And I think that so often we sabotage that by trying to expand too quickly
Right.
of their play, and really thinking about how can we join what they're doing and become an active participant with them and share joy through their lens before then adding a component. And I think that when we're adding those components or trying to expand, making sure that it's matching the function of what they're doing so that we're not bringing in something that doesn't make any sense for their play scheme, but it goes along with what they're doing and what their goal is in the play.
Yeah, I love that. So let me ask you a question, and I didn't write this before, so I hope that's okay. But what does your assessment process look like? Because I feel like what you're providing is more naturalistic. And I was talking to somebody who did a CEU course for us, and she was like, well, no, I was saying like, oh, well, I use the VB map because I get that information. And she's like, no, you really probably are putting together like what you know as a speech language pathologist and doing a lot of observations about how a child's communication is. Are you drawing from multiple areas to kind of derive your assessment or your goals, or how does that look?
Yeah, so this is not a popular opinion, but I don't love standardized assessments. I
Yeah,
find I get out very little of what I actually need from them so
right.
far from the ones I've found and used. So we typically will do 2 to 3 play-based observations. Usually
Yeah.
these are within the natural context in which services will be received, whether it's at our center, in the child's home, or in their preschool, but really watching to see what are they gravitating towards? What are they gravitating away from? And
Hmm.
then thinking about what skills would be helpful for them to have in order to access more of what matters to them. So we're really writing values-based goals, thinking about
Yeah.
what the child values, and we know that through observation or
Hmm.
from parent report. So typically we'll start with those observations. So we're going in with an open mind. We don't have any information about the child beforehand. We're not reading through those reports before we meet them. We just want to
Hmm.
meet them and get to know them as a human. And then we're after that going through those questionnaires with parents,
Hmm.
and going through whatever assessment might be helpful, whether it's the Vineland or the AFLs, looking at whatever skills the family is really wanting the child to develop.
Hmm.
And it's a very collaborative process. So we're wanting to make sure that we're writing goals that are in the family's language and not just pulled from an assessment.
Yeah, that's nice. I would imagine that takes time, but it seems like a really holistic way to do things. Because I feel like sometimes when people will be like, "Oh, I want to become duly certified. How are you using your degrees or your certifications?" And it's like hard for me to explain because it's like the way that I look at something, it seems like you're looking at something different, like the intake process, the intervention process. Your mind with all your lived experience is very different, and so I feel like I kind of approach the world in a different way like that too. Okay, that's helpful. Okay, so any don'ts about play? Like you said, I love the idea of kind of like being there with the student, but something I've always said is be a giver, not a taker. Like, I think sometimes people really, it's hard for them. They think like, oh, the student's playing with this. Well, like, then I'm going to take a turn, then they're going to take a turn. This idea of balanced turns, which can be fine. But like that idea of like, trying to get that trial in, it goes back to a different way. You're not doing intervention that way, but you understand what I'm saying, right?
I do.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing I see is that people are trying to control what the play is and where it's going, where you
Right.
never know where something is going to go, and until you truly are following the child's lead. So I'll give an example, it might be helpful. I was outside with a child who was splashing with water, and he was enjoying the way the water was dripping down from his finger. So he was more
Yeah.
exploratory play. I then added in some moss that was on the ground, and we watched the way the water dripped off of the moss. He then was picking up and pulling it apart. So then I expanded by adding in scissors so that he could cut the moss. So I
Oh,
think that we're really needing to get creative of like, what is the goal of the play right now? And how can
right.
I add in another component to it, whether that be another object or add in some kind of language models, or really thinking about how can I be a member of this, not how can I change it to be what I want it to be.
Right.
And I think that's
Yeah,
honestly, Rose, very hard to teach
it
because it's
is.
so intuitive. And like, we have a lot of goals about assenting to a play expansion. And so if we're
Yeah.
offering those expansions, are they assenting to that expansion or are they not?
Oh,
Because children are always expanding each other's play. But
uh-huh.
yeah, so I think for me is trying to control the play is the biggest way to sabotage it. Like if you're withholding objects, so a child has to ask them for it, um,
Right.
that's not play. You then,
Right.
not for many children. Again, if it takes the joy out of it, I don't think it's play anymore. I think it's then compliance to whatever skill you're trying to teach them.
Yeah, and it is so nuanced. We talk about this a lot. Like I'll say, we want to be play partners, not play directors. And I think what gets really hard on just thinking about rolling this out to others is that it is really nuanced. And I think it goes back to being 100% mentally in the session. And I talk about this a lot because you know how there's so many distractors, especially you running this business with all these, and it's growing and scaling and it's so exciting. There's so many things that are in our brain, like maybe a fight that we had with our kid or, our kid's school or, sick parents, or there's just so many things that are barriers to us being like 100% involved in sessions. I have seen in my career because I've been doing this over 20 years, just people's cell phones, people's Apple Watches. I mean, that's a barrier, right? You have to be 100% in the session because everything you're saying is so nuanced. And so like everything you say, I love it. But it is hard to have team members that are 100% on board because it is really nuanced.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's really meditative. Like if you are truly
Yeah.
in play, you're not thinking about, at least for myself, I'm not thinking about anything else that's going on in my life if I'm
Hmm.
fully present there. And if I can
Right.
get to that state of thinking, then I am able to like find those expansions that match what the child is doing. But if I'm just there, running drills or prompting skills, then I'm taking away from what the child is trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And I can imagine like there's just little things that happen. You're like, wow, this is so different. And I like that idea of a play expansion. That's really cool. That's a great. Um, so thank you so much for that thoughtful information. I feel like that's a lot of people's wheels are going to be spinning like, oh dear, like don't get overwhelmed here. Just see where you're at right now with your play, right? And you're naturalistic and then make yourself a task analysis or a plan, right? We can do this as BCBAs.
And I do,
Um,
on our website, I do have a CEU that's about play expansion. So it's this
oh,
topic for an hour and a half. So if anyone's interested that's listening,
oh.
it is on the website.
Okay. And are you an ACE provider? Is it
Yeah,
an ACE
yep,
CEU?
I am. Mhm.
Oh, okay. We might have to have you come back in 2026 and do a course for us because that sounds nice. I tried to talk about these things and I just did a course on joint attention and but I do really think it's just a mindset shift on how we're addressing things because it is very different. And honestly, I put a question every Monday. I put a question on LinkedIn. We're taping this on Monday, and my question today was like, what do you wish we had in our coursework as BCBAs? And I had child and language development. But I mean, play is not something, right, that we have utilized.
No, not in the coursework. I mean, my
Yeah.
undergrad was early childhood development and special
Okay.
education. So I had that. But then when I went to my master's, I'm like, anyone else that didn't have an educational background or developmental background, you're not getting what you need in order to
Uh-uh.
do this job at all.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a course I did a couple years ago. It's called Child and Language Milestones, just like general milestones in development. And it's an ACE course. And I always put a slide in there about how I'm going beyond the task list because I feel like some BCBAs think I'm not BCBA enough, so I'm always scared. And, but I have that in there. So that's how we're going beyond the task list, because it's important. It's important, right?
Yes, it is. It's very important. You miss everything if you don't understand child development.
You do. I know. Okay. So can you share more about neurodiversity affirming ABA? I feel like this is something you probably have a lot to share about, and I'd love to hear it.
Oh, yeah, I love this topic, and I think it's important to talk about because it's become a catchphrase. Um, and I see it all the time, and then I'll see it online, and then I meet someone in person. I'm like, whoa, that's not that's not what I thought was happening here.
Right.
But for me, shifting our practice or creating a practice that was neurodiversity affirming was really a values-based decision for myself. I'm
Yeah.
autistic, as is a lot of our staff at Unfurling Littles. And so for me, it's about creating a culture of acceptance around a child that celebrates who they are, and going past just the child, but creating a workplace that's affirming to all the variety of neurotypes that we have under our roof. So when I think about neurodiversity affirming care, neurodiversity affirming ABA, we have to zoom out and think, what is our goal here? What is our goal in everything that we're doing? And for me and our staff, our goal every day is to truly affirm who this child is. And so a couple of things that means is that we're honoring all forms of communication. So we're not putting spoken language at a higher hierarchy than using Gestalt or AAC or gestures or signs. It is at an equal playing field. We're making sure that we're always honoring bodily autonomy. So always thinking about assent. What is the bigger picture here for this kid?
Hmm.
We're also thinking about things like regulation. What does this child need in this moment, in this space, to be regulated in order to access learning? We also want to make sure that we're focusing on their strengths instead of what's, previously known as deficits. So you might hear people refer to a child as being rigid, right? We hear that all the time. But
Hmm.
for us, we might say that they value order or they value predictability. It's a value of theirs. It's not something that needs to be changed or molded or adjusted in any way. It's what they care about.
Hmm.
Um, and then lastly, making sure that above all else, we're helping this child to self-advocate for who they are and what they need to be a human in this world that really wasn't designed with them in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I do think it has become sort of a catchphrase of, neurodiversity affirming. And that is, I just always, I never really use that because I'm not autistic. I'm not raising an autistic child. I don't have an autistic mentor. I just try to, listen to autistic voices and try to use my best judgment. But I think a lot of people kind of throw that around. So that is good to know. And I think it's great that you came into the field and you're just, trying to make a shift. So I think that it's helpful for people to just hear about these things. I think some people could be listening and working in a clinic and feeling like, oh dear, we're not doing any of those things. We need to modify.
I
But
think the shifts
doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, it doesn't. And I think that the bulk of this work for me really comes down to treating humans like humans.
Right.
Don't treat a child the way that you yourself want to be treated.
Right.
And I think when we zoom out and look at that, it's like we're all just humans trying to be better humans in this
Yeah.
life. So let's
Right.
treat the kids that we work with the same respect that we would want as adults.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's just, and sometimes you have to question yourself, even just in your brain at first, like, well, why are we doing it this way? Because we've always done it this way. This is how clinic A, B, C does it. And I think sometimes it's good to hear about things and kind of analyze it. Like I'll never forget, Dr. Hanley was on the Behavioral Observations podcast, and he said, "Oh, a kid has like a favorite interest, like a special interest, and they have a toy they like or something, and they like it so much that maybe something happens at school, and there's a behavior around it, and then they never get access to that favorite thing ever again." And I was like, oh, I've seen that kind of stuff happen, and like he gets it. It's just, yeah. So I think it's great to, I hate when people call themselves trailblazers or thought leaders, but I feel like what you're saying is very, it's kind of a mindset shift, because that's the type of ABA that I try to talk about at ABA Speech. But, sometimes on Instagram, it's hard to share that information. It's not always welcomed. So, do you ever get any of that on, I don't know how long you've been on Instagram. You have a really great account at Unfurling Littles. But do you ever get anybody who comments about the fact that you are providing applied behavior analysis
Yeah,
therapy?
absolutely.
Okay.
I think in the online space, there's a lot of anti-ABA conversations, and
Yeah.
I run into a lot of it. And typically, my first response is, yeah, I agree with you. If I was practicing the way that you think I am, I would not want anything to do with that. And
Right.
so my stance is that I will never defend the field of ABA for the harm that we've caused and continue to cause every day, but I will always defend my practice and what we
Yeah.
do under our roof. And also, being honest that we make mistakes too. Everyone makes mistakes, and we're
Right.
trying to learn how to do better every day for these
Hmm.
kids. And that doesn't mean we're going to get it right 100% of the time.
Right. And I guess I did have that question on there. So what should a BCBA do if they encounter a professional who is outspoken about being anti-ABA? I guess that's something that now I've been on Instagram for 8 years. I've had my business. So I'm kind of like darkened inside. It's a hard shell there. So that doesn't bother me as much anymore. But I do think people assume certain things. When you say you're a BCBA, they might assume like your clinic runs a certain way or you're providing therapy a certain way. So I guess can you change somebody's mind on social media about ABA? And do you experience any of that anti-ABA in your real life, or is it more so on social media?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
I honestly, though, I knew a lot of people in the Philadelphia area before starting my practice, and they knew me and they know how I practice. And
Yeah.
so I think that I've been very lucky in who I've surrounded myself with here, that we're very like-minded in our
Hmm.
approach. And for me, the name of a therapy doesn't make it right or wrong. I've met a lot of speech therapists, OTs, physical therapists, psychologists that are really causing harm to kids every day. And
Right.
the same in the field of ABA. And so I don't think it's the field, it's the person practicing and the
Hmm.
way that they're practicing. And, when people, I haven't gotten a lot of pushback with my social media account. I know a lot of people who have. The few comments that I have had over the years, I feel like people who follow me pretty quickly respond to them.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
but
nice.
for me, I don't feel the need to have a discourse on a social media platform about defending what I do or what I don't do. Most
Hmm.
of the time, if I do join in any of those conversations, it's to say, I'm so sorry this has been your experience,
Yeah.
or to see what harm they feel has been caused or is continued to be caused, because maybe there's something that I'm not yet doing or that I don't yet know. So I think for me, my goal as a human is just to approach everything with curiosity. And so
Hmm.
if someone gets defensive or says they, you know, hate ABA or it's abusing kids, I'll say, I wonder what's brought you to that conclusion. I'd love to
Yeah.
learn more. Um,
Okay. I like that.
does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that. That's a good functional phrase there that I just that we could use, because I feel like a lot of people, everybody shares with me their, SLP drama, their BCBA drama, but I get a lot of comments like that sometimes. Or sometimes people will like my Instagram reel and then they'll be like, "Oh, wait, you have ABA in your handle, like my title," and then that's a trigger. Okay, great. Well, I love this. I'm so glad that we've met. I would love to bring you back. I'll talk to you through email and things like that about maybe doing a course for us in the ABA Speech Connection. Like we're really focused on offering ACE and ASHA CEUs, so for speech therapists and BCBAs around play, because I think that sounds like a really cool yeah, assenting to a play expansion. I mean, I need to know more. I love it. So where can people find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, so our website, unfurlinglittles.com, we're on there. And then social media, we have an Instagram, Unfurling Littles. I don't use it quite as much as I used to, but it is still there. And then people can reach me via email, which is just maggie.h@unfurlinglittles.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Maggie, so much for coming on the show. It's great to connect.
Thank you for having me.